Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk KFYO. Joining us on the phones this morning for the last time in 2020, our good friend Scott Braddock, editor of quorumreport.com. Scott, good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing really well, but you know how when you kind of feel sick, you get a sinus infection or something like that? Well, on Friday I started to feel terrible, but you know how you'll start to feel great, but your voice hasn't caught up just yet?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Okay.
So I've got my Chloraseptic and my cough drops at the ready, but I was not going to miss our last chance to visit this year, Chad.
Did you
get dedicated
the?
I am.
Well, I appreciate that. Did you get the nasal swab? Did you get the corona check just to make sure?
Well, it's not. No, it's not coronavirus. I didn't have a fever. I never lost sense of taste or smell or any of those other. Didn't get the splitting headache. None of that stuff. I was basically in and out of this over about a 24-hour period, but I'm still not sounding great.
Well, you sound fine with us.
All right.
You sound good.
I'll take your word for it. I think I sound terrible. No one should listen to our latest podcast, which you can check out on iTunes and Apple podcasts as well.
Very nice. Nice plug. That was good.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot to get into. And by the way, just got confirmation, just to let listeners know, program note for tomorrow. This time tomorrow, we will have Texas GOP Chairman Allen West on the program. So
that'll be interesting.
Yes, absolutely. So I just got that confirmed just a few minutes ago, which will go ahead and kind of take us into Texas GOP Chairman Allen West made a little bit of news over the weekend, Scott.
He did, and he's been explaining himself, and it brings right into question once again what the role of a GOP chairman is. And ever since Allen West took over the role earlier in the year, during that very smooth online convention of the Texas Republican Party when he was elected, I hope you can hear the sarcasm coming through. He was, faced with this question that all chairmen are faced with. Is it more about party purification, or is it more about doing the things that it takes to elect Republican candidates? Once you get past the election and Republicans do well, then the temptation a lot of times is to revert right back to the red meat, which it seems like that's where we're at. So let's start with the lawsuit that was filed by our Attorney General, Ken Paxton, to try to intervene in the elections of other states. And, of course, the Supreme Court turned this away because states don't have standing to sue other states. I'm not a lawyer, but that's the simple version, Chad, and that's the way Senator John Cornyn, our senior Republican senator here, explained it. Well, after the Supreme Court decided that they would not get involved in that case, they just weren't going to hear it, you had the chairman of the Republican Party, Allen West, say that maybe it's time for there to be a new union of states that actually want to uphold the Constitution. A lot of people read that to mean that he meant that there should be a new secession movement. Over the weekend at the State Republican Executive Committee meeting, which I was monitoring from home since I was a little under the weather, but I saw where the vice chair of the party, Kat Parks, had said that it's not the time to turn our back on our union. My understanding, she was trying to push back on this secession idea a little bit. And then you had the chairman, West, who I'm sure he'll say a version of this on your show, when he's on the show, but he was on Fox News Channel talking about it, and he said, I never used the word secession. People might have heard that, but I didn't say that. He said what he meant was that there should be states that could band together and stand against a Supreme Court that refuses to enforce the United States Constitution when it comes to our voting laws. He's making the argument that the other states should have standing based on the idea that the other states, like Texas, would be harmed if an election isn't carried out fairly. Of course, as you know, President Trump's attorneys have been, failing to get any traction for this in any court anywhere in those other states as well, by failing to bring any real evidence of any problems with the election. And so I'm not entirely sure what it, and by the way, this might be something to ask him when you talk. I'm not entirely sure what West means by banding together. If he doesn't mean forming a different union, since that's the word that he used, but it would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, and I guess if we're going off of what he said to Fox and Friends, and again, we'll visit with him tomorrow, maybe he wants other states to be more vocal about it. The Supreme Court, they soundly rejected the state of Texas direct appeal to the Supreme Court and said, listen, you don't have, like you said, Scott, basically you don't have standing to sue, to sue other states for how they run their elections. I saw a piece from, I think it was Andrew McCarthy over at National Review, where he had put out and said, listen, if this would have gone through, in theory, California could sue Texas for voter ID.
Could sue us for voter ID. The way that
could sue us for having an extra 4 days of early voting.
Absolutely. The way that Senator Cornyn explained it was the logical extension of this would be that you say you have an attorney general in one of those more liberal states like California or New York, and let's say they didn't like the fact that in Texas we have open carry, and they wanted to sue us, take us to the United States Supreme Court, and let's say New York wanted to sue Texas over the fact that you can wear a gun, in plain sight in Texas. The state of New York would have no standing to do that. The way that these suits have always worked in the federal court system, let's take abortion, for example, pro-life legislation that gets passed at the Texas Capitol. The way that works, the way it has always worked, if somebody wants to challenge it, like the Planned Parenthood types or the folks who, do women's health, women's rights advocates, those sorts of people, would say, that we're going to go to federal court in Austin, and they would do that, and then they would either be successful or not, and then that would get appealed up through the federal court system, potentially all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and that's gone different ways over the years, but that's the way it works. In other words, somebody who's within the state has to take issue with whatever the law is to take it to court and then move it up through the system. It's not that people, this is an affront to the whole idea. If the Supreme Court had weighed in on this, had even heard the case, it would open it up for that sort of thing, and it would be an affront to, I think, the folks at National Review and Senator Cornyn and others are saying that it would be an affront to federalism and to the 10th Amendment, that there are states' rights and that, the states are sovereign entities that get to, create their own policies, and then things get battled out at the state level first before any intervention at the federal level.
Yeah, well, it did get tossed. I think most people are just surprised it wasn't even heard. That it wasn't even entertained, or at least those who are surprised. Maybe they're surprised that that it didn't get even a little bit of interest with the U.S. Supreme Court. Moving forward now, it's the electors meet today, Scott, and the presidential election will be done today.
This should be it, although there is one more chance for the president's most ardent supporters to try to make their case when this is all finished up.
January 6th, yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah, before the U.S. House. And in Washington, they finally do the last rubber stamp thing, that happens after every... And Chad, isn't it funny how we're all getting the civics lesson, right? I mean, if people didn't notice these things that were just sort of rubber stamp, steps in the process before, they certainly notice them now.
Yeah.
It's breaking news all day that the Electoral College is going to do what it's supposed to, just basically do what is a ministerial act, which means they just do the thing. It's already been decided by the people in each of the states, who won each state. President Trump won in Texas at 2:00 this afternoon. At the Texas House of Representatives, those who were chosen by the Republican Party to be the electors will go in there and cast the electoral votes for President Trump, since he won this state, and in those other states where President-elect Biden won, those electors in those state capitals will cast the votes for him. Really is a formality, but there's been just at every turn some effort made by the Trump campaign to try to influence that, and we've seen where his attorneys and the president himself has personally intervened in some of these places, or at least tried to, and asked different speakers of the House in different states, different governors to step in and say, why don't you have your electors just cast the votes the other way, which would be unprecedented. Not sure that that's ever happened, but that's where we're at.
Yeah. Let's see. Any update on what the upcoming session may look like?
So much talk about it, and it's all really up for grabs. We're trying to figure out exactly what the session will look like during a pandemic. Now that we do have the vaccines coming in, Chad, and of course that's happening all across the state. Did y'all get a delivery in Lubbock today?
I hope we did.
Yeah, I'm seeing where different hospitals around the state, and that's the plan, is that those frontline workers will get the vaccines first. There's some question about whether state leadership, or those people who are in the legislature, the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker, will get the vaccine first. I know that, or close to first. I saw where the House Administration Chairman Charlie Guerin had told a group that he thought it would be appropriate for, and this was a possibility, that the big three, Speaker, Lieutenant Governor, and Governor, would get the vaccine in a press conference, so that everybody could see them get it, show everybody that it's safe. And they have to do their job. I know that there may be some controversy about that, whether or not the powerful folks should be able to get this first, them and their staff. But, constitutionally, Chad, they only have 5 months every 2 years to get their job done in Austin in a regular session. And so if they were waiting around, last in line to get the vaccine, that wouldn't give them the chance to do what they need to do, which is write the budget for the state of Texas and, get to the redistricting issue and, take care of school finance and all the other sort of commitments that the state of Texas has. So while I'm not sure if it'll be popular, it is probably something that needs to happen. And then on, the other fronts that we've kind of talked about here on the show, whether the media will be allowed on the floor of the House and Senate, that's still a question, although I think that it's, highly likely that it would be very limited. And public access, that's the other big question. Will average Texans be able to get into the Capitol? The Lieutenant Governor is demanding that people get, and this is what we had reported out last week, that, that people get a coronavirus test within 24 hours of visiting the Capitol, that they be able to show evidence of that, and that if they're going to testify in a hearing, then they would have to sign up for it 3 days in advance so that the folks at the Capitol could plan for all the folks who are going to be there. A huge undertaking, and the other big controversial thing that is still completely unsettled, and we talked about it, I think, last week, this idea of remote voting, whether or not the senators and House members would be able to vote from somewhere other than their desks in the House and Senate chamber. There are a lot of members of both the Republican and Democratic Party who are against that, but some others say it may be necessary, if you have members who have to quarantine because they've either been exposed or test positive for coronavirus.
Yeah. Scott, anything interesting going on in the SD30 race?
Well, I was checking on that last week. Was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and then out in the rural parts of the district as well, in the Sherman area. And, it's just one attack after another. You've seen it all, on social media and online. You've got Shelley Luther and Drew Springer who are just going at it, just at each other's throats, really. We took a look at their campaign finances over the weekend, Chad, and we have the full report at quorumreport.com. Interesting that Governor Abbott's main consultant, Dave Carney, was just blowing up Shelley Luther for the fact that her campaign finances, almost all of the money that she raised, $564,000, after spending about $869,000, almost all that money came from Tim Dunn, the chairman of Empower Texans. And her supporters, Luther's supporters, were firing back at Carney, Representative Jonathan Sticklin, who you know, of course, from Bedford, Texas. He was saying to Carney, well, Luther doesn't have to go down there to the fundraisers and call all the contributors, go to Austin, telling people that they need to donate because, as he says, she's actual grassroots, although it's harder to make that case when all your money comes from one person. So it's real ugly out there, Chad. And I can tell you that in these final days of a campaign like this, when there are so many accusations being made, you got to take all the accusations with a grain of salt because we're getting down to it. As you know, early voting is wrapping up, I believe, tomorrow in that race, and the election day is on the 19th, this coming Saturday.
All right, Scott, that sounds very good. Tell folks what they can find at quorumreport.com, not only today, but through the end of the year.
Through the end of the year, we're going to be taking a look at the year that was. What are the lessons that can be learned? Although, as one very smart consultant said to me one time, when you take a look at whatever election just happened, you can learn all that you can, but then maybe forget all of it because you'll never have an election like that again. Although we do have, some indications of what this election season does mean for the coming legislative session and what the actual issues they need to focus on are. We'll cover all that for you at quorumreport.com. You can sign up for our daily email alerts there at quorumreport.com. Click on subscriptions. We'll get you all signed up.
All right. Sounds great. Scott, thank you very much. Appreciate all the time you've given us this year, and we'll talk to you in 2021.
Merry Christmas to your listeners and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas. That's Scott Braddock, editor of quorumreport.com. Scott, thank you.